Hola, muy buenos días, buenas
Hello,
tardes.
good morning, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to say hi to everyone. Please be welcome. This is the first webinar of the series that we have prepared for the One Planet City Challenge of this edition. Before we can start, I would like to remind you that we have a simultaneous interpretation services. You can go at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. You see a globe. You can click there and then you can choose the language of your preference. And once that you have activated it, then we can keep moving forward. My name is Saimi Hernandez. I work in the WWF Mexico City Coordination area, and I will be throughout this webinar. Also, we have Uri Coludo, and he's from Chile, and Irene from WWF Mesoamerica. So in this case, just to give you a little bit of context of what is happening with this webinar and how it happened, I would just like to mention that this is the first of the series that we have prepared for this edition of the One Planet City Challenge. As most of you may remember, just in case you don't know it, the One Planet City Challenge is a biennial-friendly competition that happens in WWF. It has for over 10 years. It happened originally in Sweden, and little by little it has been expanding throughout the world. In the last edition that we had over 280 cities around the world. And as a result of that, we had some global and national winners. Among the global winners, and we had Blund in Sweden and Bogota in Colombia. Those were the winners. And in this case, we are providing a little bit more information about the city that was a global winner. I would only like to also remind you as well, if next to your name, you can specify the city that you are representing so that we can identify each other. And of course, part of the rules is if you could please help us. If you have any question or any comment, you can write it down in the chat. A little bit later, we will also be giving a follow-up to the questions that you have. And actually, even in the Q&A section, you could also raise your hand. Please, let's wait until we get to that section so that we can participate. And then with that, we will give you the floor. So as I was saying, this One Planet City Challenge, in this case, it has the following edition from 2023 to 2024. Very soon we will be providing a little bit more information for each one of your countries, but right now I would like to mention or share with you this list of contacts of the different cities and the different offices that are represented. As you can see, we have participation from Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Mesoamerica, which includes Belize, Honduras, Panama, and Guatemala, also Mexico and Peru. And so as you can see here, we have the list of the contacts so that you can contact them, message them, and we will gladly provide a little bit more information of the cities for this edition. And if any of you are interested in taking part, you can contact us, and with that, we will give you a follow-up. Without any further ado, I would like to talk to you a little about the agenda for today. We are going to have this brief welcome, and afterwards we will have the participation of the Bogota representative that was one of our global winners, and so they are going to share what are the secrets for success and how they achieved these success and all the efforts that they have made. Also, we have a Q&A section, and finally the closing. Also, I would like to mention that, of course, no city is perfect. They all, or we all, have an opportunity area to address, and there is always going to be something that can be improved. So we can keep working so that we can have a better environment, a better city, and provide a better citizenship as well. And so let's attempt to reach those goals and also to support among each other. As you can see, what we can do in this One Planet City Challenge is we give an accompaniment to the city so that they can achieve their goals. So you can definitely know that WWF can be that support for you as well. And well, now I would like to introduce our presenter for today. She is Carolina Urrutia. She is the Secretary for Environment in Colombia, Bogota. She studied in the Ibero-American University in Mexico, and afterwards she also participated in Harvard University. She has participated in Mexico's Environment Secretary and also in the Defense Ministry for Colombia. As I was mentioning, she is currently the Environment Secretary in Bogota, Colombia. And this city, just to tell you a little bit more about it, it has 7,412,000 inhabitants. Actually, this is the most populated area in Colombia. It is constituted by 20 districts, and it has an extension of 1,707 and 75 square meters. It's actually a little bit bigger than Mexico City. And just for you to know a little bit more about what the jury found, the one that was evaluating the different cities, is that this action plan, the climatic action plan for Bogota, has very ambitious goals because it includes reducing on half the emissions by 2030 and also to have zero by 2050. So that is amazing, and we would really love to hear a little bit more about that. These climate action plan also includes actions in sectors that tend to be hard to impact. And well, despite the numerous challenges, they have managed to position themselves nationally in Colombia, but also internationally. And so without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Carolina Urrutia for her to tell us a little bit more about their work. Thank you so much, Sami. It is such a pleasure for me to be with you today. And the acknowledgement that we received from WWF is something that we really, really value a lot. Just as you said, we have worked very, very hard in our climate action plan. We have made a huge effort so that we can give the city a path towards transition so that we can have sustainability in environmental and climatic changes or terms. And also, it has been accompanied by a historic moment in the city where all the political stakeholders, the council, they all have been really taken into account how to give more visibility to these matters. Now, I'm going to start, but just give me 1 second. I am in the city council. I also have here Diego Rubio, who is our director. If I'm called, I'm going to have to leave because it is totally mandatory here at the council. You cannot really escape. So I'm going to provide as much as possible of the presentation. And if I have to leave, I really apologize. Hopefully there is not a lot of noise, but if there are, please let me know. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what can I tell you about what is the big secret in Bogota? We have split this into the knowledge management, that is the investment that we have made for our scientific basis to be robust, also for our climatic action to be planned based on science as well as the goals, mostly hoping that that can give this a continuity among different future administrations. One of the things that we're afraid always in any administration is that the next administration cuts a specific area of work, and starting with this knowledge is one of the ways that we are trying to guarantee that our climatic action plan is not ours, but instead Bogota's. The second one is to also include this in the land management. We were actually very lucky in Bogota because we had the chance to develop our plan as well as our land management plan. This is a document that is issued every 12 years in the city, and it hadn't been updated for a very long time. The third point is that, well, we already had some climate action in terms of how to understand mobility, eco-urbanism, and also we were working in circular economy. So these transversal point of view from the climate was very important. And fourth, the regreening strategy that we have so that we can really highlight the conditions for ecosystemic connectivity and biodiversity connectivity as well in the city, and everything that we're doing as well in terms of investment, and also the specific instruments where we have managed to land these climate actions so that, as I was saying, it can really be a city policy and not an administration policy. So let's go to the next one. The next one, please. Okay, so what were our first steps? When we reached the district government, we realized that they didn't have an inventory since 2016 of greenhouse gases. So the first thing that we needed to do was get up to date and have updated data about Bogotá's emission. Number two, where we had a little bit more of advance was understanding the climatic risk from the city. From the institute, we had worked and we had really tried to move forward so that we could be able to lower this risk that we call it UPZ, which is neighborhood by neighborhood, so that we know what were the risks that we were facing, not only in these 20 localities or units that the city is divided in, but neighborhood by neighborhood, so that they could help us take decisions. The third point, we did all of this at the same time, we also wanted to move forward with discussions in different sectors in city participation. We know we have, for example, some councils, the city council, we have some commissions for risk management. We have different ways in which we really had to tell what we were doing. And of course, something that I really think that was the key of success was not to wait until we had the plans completely finished so that we could start implementing, but instead we were implementing while we were planning. And I think that that is a challenge for all cities. If we wait until we have perfect information, we're never going to start acting. And action is what is needed, not perfect, complete documents. If I'm not mistaken, and Diego can tell me, otherwise it's almost the fifth edition of our climate plan, and that is an alive document, and so we have to keep changing it and making it richer. Please let me know if you can hear me correctly, because there's a lot of people around me. So this inventory of greenhouse gases told us some things that we already knew, but we needed to have this solid information regarding trying to confirm our instincts and what we knew since 2016. Almost half of our emissions come from the transportation sector. Also, just as many cities, we have also energy consumption, industrially very high. And our energy matrix is relatively clean, but still 19% of our emissions come from energy consumption. The industry, of course, in a city such as Bogota is around 20% of the GDP of the country. That is also important. And in terms of sewage, we also have a good amount of emissions. So in terms of the country, we are not big in terms of the emissions that we are issuing. As you can see, the biggest emission source is the Afolu. And so in that sense, the emissions from Bogota don't really play a very important role in the country, even when we have a big part of the GDP. Now, that is also because we didn't really reach the indirect impact that we should be measuring. And of course, that is another challenge that we should be facing. But right now, we didn't have that information so that we could do that. The next slide, please. So our climate risk assessment, and I think that this is probably among the most important or interesting part of our plan, what it allows for us is to know exactly what are the climate risks and to have an index of risks so that we can adapt in the face of those scenarios. So in that sense, we know neighborhood by neighborhood in Bogota, what are the higher climate risks that we are facing. And so we summarized in 4 the main risks, although again, as I mentioned, these are neighborhood by neighborhood. The temperature in rural areas is going to increase around 0.25 degrees, which is a noticeable increase. And this is something that I was mentioning in the introduction. Bogota is very big because it's 75% rural. It is actually a very rural city, and so these increases of temperature can be concerning in terms of production and food safety. In the urban area, the temperature can increase around 0.6 2065. And we are going to have, in terms of precipitation, a very important change. In the east side, in the west side, we see that the precipitations are going to increase, and in the east side, the rain is going to diminish to 15%. So we are going to have to face that. Diego specifically is working very hard so that we can be also prepared for fires, and those are going to be one of our main challenges in terms of climate change. The next slide, please. Now, the second aspect that I was telling you, and if you asked me what is the big secret, I would always summarize this because the Miss Claudia Lopez, since we started having these land management plan, gave us the instruction that it had to be very clearly planned for 12 years around climate risk. So that is why we also decided not to make these urban areas bigger, but instead we wanted to think about the city as a city that can be renewed so that we don't grow in our rural areas and we don't get rid of the protected or green areas. So we used this ecologic infrastructure, that's how we called it, and a 30%. We also consolidated a reserve at the north area of the city, thinking about this future and also thinking about the adaptation. We also have new district ecological parks, and we created a new category for rurality, and it's called sustainable landscapes. And so they allow some agricultural activity, but also it has some elements for environmental protection. The next one, please. That one, yes, thank you. Now, the Sumapaz area that wasn't originally included in our previous plan. We just declared it as a protected area. We also declared new wetland reserves and also how they had to be handled. We also created the basis for some areas of low emissions. These are the urban zones for a better air. We are going to implement actions where the quality of air can improve, especially where we have the critical aspects of the quality of air. And also we included mechanisms for restoration, repair, and compensation that guarantee for this infrastructure to be there, but also to function appropriately. The next slide, please. So Bogota, next one, please, has been working for a very long time in mobility, whether it's improving the fuels, etc. We're doing everything that we can so that we can build the first metro network in the city. All of this was also included in the land management plan, and this is something that we had already worked before, and that allowed for us to have very clear goals in the sector that actually contribute the most to this emission. So now we have 1,485 electric buses. We are competing with Santiago so that we can be the city with the highest number of electric buses. We are convinced that biddings have to prioritize and they have to give that example towards the zero emission mobility. We also have some goals from these the climate action plan, also so that we can mobilize this transition in vehicles, particular or individual vehicles, so that all of them can be zero emissions by 2040. Also, the investment, and this is something that is an agreement of the city because it was part of the declaration of emergency. By 2030, the official vehicles should be electric, that is zero emissions. And then we are trying to have from 39 electric cabs to 100% by 2040. And what is critical is also for cargo vehicles in Bogota and probably in all cities. And so we are probably not going to reach zero emissions, but we can really have low emissions through this technological transition. And for that, actually last week we announced a fund so that the district can help the transportation companies to finance their transition. Next one, please. So in the energy transition, we have a lot of risks and big risks in Bogota. Why? Because we have always perceived that since our energy matrix is relatively clean, we haven't really invested a lot. And second, because we really rely a lot on the decisions that are taken at a national level. I think that as many cities, our decisions for energy consumption are not as autonomous as we would like them to be. However, we have some projects that can allow for us, just as with official vehicles, to move so that public lighting, and now it is LED, is a lot more efficient, but also our buildings can truly have solar panels and also some other ways to use clean energy. The next one, please. So we have a program which is called Bogota, Circular Bogota, and that is a very important part of this action plan. And the goal here is for us to change our habits, to generate new businesses, and so that we diminish the burial of waste. We have a support from WWF, and the intention here is that we can truly use and leverage new technologies in this specific area. We have a strategy which is called Circular Bogota for Fashion, which we're trying to reduce the waste of 400 tons of textile waste. And also, well, actually, Bogota was one of the first cities that used biogas. But this time we're trying to maybe see or try to do some other option. And so we're also trying to see what other cities are doing in this regard. So we are still assessing or trying to find or figure out what is going to be the specific strategy in that regard. The next slide, please. So everything that has to do with greening up, so to speak, this is something that has been a very important political aspect of the mayor. And the next slide, please. We are trying not just to declare protected areas, which but also we are trying to rethink them from the systemic connectivity. So that is why we're trying to declare from the land management plan these systemic networks that maybe are not protected areas, but they are intervention measures that can allow us to improve these coverages and the public spaces like parks, etc., so that we can guarantee higher or more biodiversity and better connectivity. And so we are trying to have this systemic connectors throughout the city, and so that we can rehabilitate and recover these areas. We included a new section, which is the urban parks. Of course, we're always trying to base on nature, and also we really want to focus on these knowledge. And so with that, we can have a better credibility in what we're doing. This is an essential part because we're trying to strengthen the citizen participation. The protected areas, the green areas, these are not from the government, these are from the city. And so as long as we can take care of them and we can understand how they function, then we can, of course, pay more attention to urban biodiversity. The property taxing is always an important part of conservation and connectivity, but is no longer our core piece. What we are trying to do now is to diversify the way in which we are intervening with the territory so that we can have a higher possibility to make it green again. And we also made a decision, and it was an important one, and that is we changed the way in which we can compensate losing trees in the city. And I'm pretty sure that all of my colleagues may suffer the same thing that we do. Cities constantly are transforming. They are alive and they're in constant transformation somehow. And so because of these transformation processes, we constantly have to intervene, whether it's because they're being chopped down or we have to make decisions. So the best way in which we can actually make these decisions is by having a compensation strategy that can be abundant, that can really be convincing, and also that is credible. So we changed this methodology so that minimum if we lose one tree, it can be compensated with 5 in rural areas. Sometimes we actually go all the way to 7, but in urban areas, we don't have a lot of space to plant. So that is the task that we are still trying to pay attention to. The next slide, please. This is a topic that we are so inspired by during the pandemic, when we were thinking about how to create green employment and how we can also find opportunities to also navigate that economic crisis. We created this program of monetary transference where it maybe could be, if it's 600,000 pesos. I don't really dare to say how much this is in terms of dollars, but the goal was mostly we're talking about women and vulnerable conditions that have been able to participate in some training, and they have been able to receive monthly an amount to work 20 hours per week. That gives them a lot more autonomy and, of course, a lot more knowledge so that they can take care of these ecosystems in Bogota. Hopefully, this is a program that can prevail, but we are convinced that what we did with the program really allows for women to also share these knowledge and how to take care of the green areas of the city. The next slide, please. Planting is so important. So from these greening strategies and restoration strategies, I'm right with you. We wanted to plant 1 million trees. We are going to be around 800,000. The pandemic made it harder in terms of trees, and the truth is that we don't really have a lot of urban areas to be able to plant them. We're going to have to work a lot also in that rural aspect of things. These figures are actually a little out of date because we are going to remain with 800,000, and with this year we are really hoping that we can get to these goals according to the changes that we have made. Now, this is important in terms of continuity. We, as I was saying, the next slide, please, we have our climate action plan. That is a live document. We have the support from C40, among others. And so we had this first document. And afterwards, we are turning this into a policy. Bogota, of course, has a cabinet that can approve the district policies. And so we are turning this climate action plan into a public policy for it to remain in time. But at the same time, we're also having some discussions with the cabinet because we are establishing by decree the climate goals for the city among the different sectors. So for mitigation, we have 4 goals, which is buildings, transportation, solid waste, and sewage. And for adaptation, we have sustainable sewage and green areas. And so what we are trying is for them to be as a decree and for them to not be easy to change, because otherwise it is going to be very hard otherwise. I am very convinced, I don't know what my colleagues from our other cities may think, but I am convinced that in the midterm, we're going to have mandatory goals in much more demanding legal frameworks than what we have today. Because the truth is that just as a volunteer, we are not really achieving our goals, and we're probably going to need a little bit more. And I think that, yes, we need to have a little bit more seriousness in how we are complying with our goals. The next one, please. So the adaptation component, we have some indicative actions or criteria, for example, for all of the environmental management plans. We also have the identification of climate risks, also the vulnerability that can be shown in terms of health, and we have also a goal in terms of water scarcity. And in the transversal component, we have goals in terms of knowledge, private sector, cooperation, alliances, and also actions that can incentive the co-responsibility with the citizenship. The next one, please. So the policy that I am telling you about, we are still building it. Compass in Bogota is very demanding. We have actually had over 40 workshops with different groups, ethnical groups, with women, locality by locality, so that we can know what are their concerns in terms of climate change and to make sure that they are part of the policy. And on top of everything, just as all policies, that budget can be clear. So what do we want to achieve? We want to manage the actions for the adaptation of the effects of climate change and the mitigation of emissions. We also want to, of course, be sticking to the Paris Agreement and the commitments that we have with C40, also to incorporate the different approaches, which of course is always a challenge, because these policies should not be technical just in aspects of climate change, but they should also adequately reflect the social matters. as what I was saying, we have been working a lot with all of the public entities, with communities, with the private sector. And so in the policy, we're going to set some goals, long-term goals up to 2050. And of course, we're going to have some indicators of each one of them. So this year, we're going to have this ready. I think it's going to be around July. Hopefully it will be ready. We already finished with the diagnosis phase. This is a very solid document, very long, but hopefully the city can have this as part of a legacy. The next one, please. So, due to all of this, but mostly because there was political will, the mayor made of these climate change and climate crisis a huge priority to her administration. And we were lucky enough that the city council also declared this climate emergency and it gave this a priority. I think that this is something that is happening in all the cities in Latin America. I don't think that we are the only one, but political will is the only thing that can allow for those trade-offs that we are going to have for them to be acceptable. That is, there are some sacrifices, yes, and so if those sacrifices are not clear and they are not visible from the mayors or the leaders in each one of the cities, then it's going to be very hard for them to try to lower our emission levels along the way. I think I complied with the time. I still have 5 more minutes and afterwards I need to leave, but the team is still here. Thank you very much, Ms. Carolina. I think that your presentation has been very inspiring. We have seen some of the challenges that you have faced and of course some of those achievements that you have had. I think it's very interesting to see the importance that the political will actually has and how this has helped for this to happen in Bogota, right? And just as you were saying, I think that this is also something that is very prevalent in the Latin American region. And so with this, I would like to ask you, while we also have some questions from our participants, maybe if they want to comment something or ask a question, what keeps you motivated? Because I think that something has happened a lot as well in the region, right? Sometimes cities feel that there is not much to do or there are not a lot of resources. There is a lot of a lack of financing. So what keeps you motivated to keep working on this? Well, we are motivated, for example, by the acknowledgement that we received from WWF. I think that that recognition, that visibility helps us stay motivated. Number two, I believe that in Bogota, luckily, the resource matter is less complex because Bogota has a big environmental sector. Also, we have 1,600 people working in the environmental secretary or ministry. There is a lot of people there to be able to do the work. And in a way, we started seeing the result of our work. And I think that that is what motivates us a lot to be able to go to the meetings and neighborhood by neighborhood and say, okay, so these are the risks, and maybe we could have an urban park here. And so we can share all of these social matters. And I think that with that, we are a lot more connected as well and motivated. I am going to have to leave. I'm so sorry because I'm being threatened, but Diego is going to stay here. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I cannot stay a little bit more time, but it is really an honor for me to have been recognized by WWF, and everything that we can do with other cities is welcome. I have to leave, but Diego stays. Thank you so much, and thank you, Paula, Saimi. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary. Have a great day. Okay, perfect. So if you agree, so we have Diego here. He's also going to be supporting us, as the secretary was mentioned, in terms of the questions that you may have. So I would like to give you, Carlos, the floor. Yes, hi, hello, good morning. What an interesting presentation. Hi, hello, Diego. Hi, Carlos. So two questions that are a little bit different. The first one has to do with the mechanism that you are implementing to give a continuity to these policies. You were talking about trying to turn this into a policy from the state so that whenever there is a change of administration, the programs are not changed. So that is one aspect of it. But then the other aspect has to do with how you deal with the real estate developers that specifically in Argentina cities, they generate a lot of pressure so that we have a lot of obstacles in terms of everything that has to do
Gracias,
with
Carlos. No, pues lo
climate
primero
risks
es
and
reglas de juego,
biodiversity.
¿no?
Thank you,
En el
Carlos. Well, first of
institucionalismo y en
all,
el
I
Estado
think
de
the rules
Derecho,
of the game. I
las
meant the
normas, las políticas son las que
institutionalism,
orientan
the
a medio y largo
policies,
plazo
the
esas
rule of law,
transformaciones
those are
importantes
the
del
ones that
Estado.
actually can
La agenda de
guide
cambio
the
climático es una agenda que tiene que estar
changes in
orientada
the
a
state.
largo
And so
plazo porque
this
las
climate
inversiones y
agenda
los
has to
proyectos que se
be
necesitan de
long term
ciudad
because the
no se
investments
logran en
in the
corto tiempo.
city, of course, are not going
En
to
ese
happen in a
sentido,
short
nosotros
term.
con la
So in that
incorporación
sense,
de
we
el, sí,
with the
con la incorporación
incorporation
de esta política,
of
lo que vamos a
these
establecer es que las
policy, what
siguientes
we're going to
administraciones tengan
establish
una
is
hoja de
that
ruta
the
clara para poder
following
incorporar en los planes
administrations
de
can have
desarrollo
a very
los
clear
proyectos
roadmap
y las
so that they
inversiones
can
necesarias para hacer esa
incorporate
transición,
the investments
especialmente en lo que
and
son
everything that
componentes
is
de
needed to do this
infraestructura urbana,
transition, especially what
¿cierto?
has to do
En
with
el
urban
tema de la
infrastructure
conservación de las áreas
and,
protegidas que
for
aumentamos con el plan
example, for the
territorial.
conservation of
Y también en, digamos, esos compromisos que el
protected
sector
areas.
privado
And
deben
so
tener en
these
torno a
commitments
la
in the
construcción.
private
Y
sector
ahí
have to
paso
have
rápidamente a la
also
segunda pregunta que tú nos
a
planteas.
focus in terms of
Bogotá es una
construction,
ciudad
and
que
that
está
is what
en
you're saying,
constante
right? So
renovación urbana.
Bogota is
Nosotros en este
constantly
momento tenemos
renewing.
alrededor de
Right now, we
35
have
planes de
around
renovación urbana, es decir,
35
las ciudades,
plans
esos barrios que
for
se van quedando
renovation. That is
antiguos,
the neighborhoods
obsoletos,
that maybe are
entran en un proceso de renovación
obsolete. They
y
go
nosotros
into
lo que
this
estamos
process
haciendo en
for
el marco de lo que
renovation.
incluye
And
el
what
plan de
we're
desarrollo
doing
territorial
under
es
this
incorporar
framework
unos
is that we
principios
are
y unas orientaciones muy
incorporating
claras del
some
urbanismo
principles that are
para que
very
esos nuevas
clear so that
edificaciones,
those new
barrios,
constructions,
conglomerados de
those
ciudad
new
incorporen
neighborhoods or
elementos de
conglomerates
adaptación y
can
mitigación
incorporate some
al
elements
cambio
of
climático,
adaptation and
específicamente
mitigation
en
to
elementos como el
climate change,
confort térmico
specifically in
para mitigar
elements
cualquier
like, for
uso,
example, trying to mitigate
digamos, de
any
aspectos de
type of
enfriamiento, en temas
use
de
of
confort acústico
cooling
para que la ciudad
or
sea más
also
amable en temas
acoustically
de
so
lo que es
that
transporte
the
versus
city
la
can be
habitabilidad,
kinder
en el
in terms of
componente de
transportation,
sistemas
also
urbanos
a
de drenaje
component
sostenible para
from
evitar
sustainable
la
sewage so that we
impermeabilización del
can
suelo. Bogotá, digamos, fue una ciudad
avoid
que
the impermeabilization
constantemente
of the
se
soil
amplió de
because
forma
Bogota
desordenada
is
y lo que hizo fue
a city that
endurecer.
was
Tenemos que
actually
restablecer la
it was
permeabilidad
made
del suelo para
bigger
evitar sus
without
encharcamientos,
having
como
an
decía la
actual order,
secretaria,
and so we
en
have
la
to pay
parte
attention to
occidental de la
that.
ciudad, donde se ubican
And
alrededor
just
de
as the
4 millones
secretary
de
was
personas,
saying, we
tenemos
have in
muchos
an
de esos
area of
planes
the
de
city
renovación
4
urbana
million
y tenemos
people and
que
a lot
aumentar la
of projects
permeabilidad,
for this
porque
renewal,
si
but
la
we have
precipitación va a
to
aumentar
pay
en un
attention to this
35%
because if
y seguimos endureciendo,
precipitation is going to
esto
increase in a
¿qué va a
35%,
implicar?
that
Encharcamientos,
what is
inundaciones en
going
esas nuevas
to
ocupaciones urbanas
cause?
que
Well,
vamos
we're
a
going
hacer.
to have
Entonces,
floodings in
estamos
these new
dejando todos esos
areas. So
componentes
we
en
are
la
trying
reglamentación del
to
plan de
also
ordenamiento
include all
territorial,
of these components in
específicamente
these
en el
rules or in
componente
these
de
plan,
urbanismo.
especially when we talk about
Y pues
urbanism.
lo que ya ha mencionado la secretaria
And
también,
what
el plan de
we
ordenamiento territorial da una línea,
are
una hoja de ruta
also
de reglas de juego de 2022 a 2035 como
saying is
mínimo,
that this
y esto
roadmap
establece que todos los permisos de
establishes that
construcción que
all
se
of the
avancen de aquí en
construction
adelante
permits
tengan
that
que
we can have
cumplir
from
esos
now on,
elementos
they have
de
to
adaptación
comply
al cambio
with
climático
that
que pues estaba
those
mencionando.
elements
Entonces,
that I was
lo más
mentioning.
importante es tener
And
esas
so
reglas de
what's
juego
more
claras desde
important
los
is to
instrumentos
have these
principales
rules
que
of the
tiene la
game
ciudad para
clear
Bogotá y imagino que para otras
for a
ciudades de
city,
latinoamericanas
and
también
of
es
course for
los
other
planes de
Latin
ordenamiento
American
territorial.
cities, we
Pero
need
lo
to
más
have these
importante
plans.
es
But the
que
most
esto se
important
visibilice
aspect
en
here
cada uno de
is
los
that there
planes
has to be
distritales
a
de desarrollo
visibility in each one
que
of the
tiene cada
district
vigencia
plans
en
for
cada ciudad.
development. That is
Porque si no
the
se le
ones that
mete
each
los
city can
recursos
have, because
suficientes de la inversión
otherwise we
pública,
are
va a
not
ser
going
muy
to have the
difícil que
resources
esos
there.
lineamientos
And
y
if
esa
that
política
happens, then
pública
it's
que
going to
estamos
be very
estableciendo pues
hard
se
for
vuelva
those
realidad.
guidelines to
Eso sería
become
más o
a
menos, Carlos.
reality. So
No
I
sé si
think
quedó
that would
claro
be my
la
response. I
respuesta.
don't know if maybe that was clear. Yes, thank you very
Vale.
much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you, Diego. Please, Victor Hugo Montalva, and also if you could please tell us what city are you representing? Hi, hello, thank you very much. My name is Victor Hugo Montalva. I am the environmental director from San Pedro de la Paz in Chile, and we are receiving all of the smoke from the fires. I don't know if you know, but in the south area of Chile, in the different regions, we have a lot of fires these days, very intense ones. So I'm under the smoke talking to you in the south of Chile, and of course it's very hot. But my question, I don't know if you can, I don't know if I actually heard properly, but the secretary, would that be the equivalent? Because she said that they had
Sí,
1,600 people. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, because then my question is, what is the budget that you have or that you work in for the different municipalities of Bogota? Because I understand that your institution is the equivalent to what I am or I have, and we have a budget that I guess that we cannot really achieve anything of what you have done, right? So how can you make it compatible, what has to do with the high social demand uh, to improve this management, and if you need budget for that, because you are an example city for us, but it is an example almost as if it was counter intuitive, because we're probably never going to have the resources that you have so that we can reach that level of excellence that now can allow you to have the acknowledgement that you have today. So having how is that experience with so much resources versus what we can do? Because everything that you can do, we can, but the
Claro.
scale is very different. A lot of effort, very few resources, and few
Vale.
will
No, Hugo,
from
espero que
the
logres
people.
solventar el tema de
Okay,
incendios,
well,
que es un tema
hopefully
y
you
un
can
problema
solve
muy
those
complejo. Nosotros también hemos
fires
tenido algunos
because that is
eventos
very
aquí en
complex. We
Bogotá.
have also
Muy
had
puntual
some
a tu
events
pregunta.
like
Sí,
those
nosotros tenemos
here in Bogota.
1.600 entre
Yes, we
funcionarios y
have
contratistas. Funcionarios son alrededor de
1,600
150,
people.
contratistas son
We have
1.450.
between
Y eso es
both
muy
contractors
importante
and high
para
officials.
diferenciar.
And
La
so
fuente de
we have to also
financiamiento
make
son,
a
digamos, de
reference
dos
because
rubros. Aquí
the
en Colombia
financing
es
comes
parecido en
from
otras
two
ciudades, que
paths
es
here in
funcionamiento, que es,
Colombia. And
digamos,
so
lo
we have the
misional, lo
functioning,
que es el transporte, la
which is, for
seguridad,
example,
todos
the
esos componentes.
transportation,
Y el otro ya es la
safety,
inversión para
etc.
los
And
proyectos de
then the
ciudad que cada
investment
plan
for the
distrital
city
establece.
projects
Entonces, en
that
ese
each
componente
district
del proyecto,
establishes.
digamos,
So with
de
that
lo que es
component,
los proyectos de
we
inversión,
see what are the
desde el
investment
plan distrital de
projects.
desarrollo sí se le
And from
asignó
the
en esta
district
administración una cantidad
development
de recursos
plan,
mucho más alta a
we
la que se venía
see a
haciendo
lot
históricamente.
more budget
Fuera de eso,
allocated to
Colombia
us
tiene
as it
unas
had been
fuentes de
before.
destinación
Apart from
específica
that,
para
Colombia
asignar a las
also has,
autoridades
Bogota
ambientales, a las
has a way
corporaciones nacionales, a
to,
las
for
secretarías
example,
distritales
assign
en
the
el
different
cumplimiento de lo que
instances,
es
the compliance
la administración de
of
adquisición de
the
áreas de importancia
administration and
estratégica para el
acquisition
abastecimiento hídrico.
of
Entonces, ese es un
strategic
rubro muy
areas.
importante
So
que
that is a very
por
important
norma está establecido que el
aspect
1%
that
de
it
los
is
ingresos
already established
corrientes de
that
cada ciudad tiene que
1%
estar
of the
destinada
income of
a esa
each
inversión.
city has
En
to
el caso de
go to that
Bogotá,
investment.
podemos estar
So
hablando que son
in
alrededor
case
de
of
100 mil
Bogota,
millones
we
de
can say
pesos
that it's
año, que son unos
around
20 millones de dólares mal contados con la tasa de
$20
cambio tan volátil
million,
que hemos tenido.
let's say,
Pero también nos
doing
plantea un
the
reto, ¿no? Porque no
conversion.
es solamente
But that
tener
is
la
also a
destinación de
challenge because
recursos,
it's not just having the
sino
resources, but also it's
diseñar
a
la
matter of
contratación,
designing the
sacar la licitación
hiring and
pública,
also have the
contratarla
public
y
bidding,
ejecutarla. Entonces, no es
hire it,
solamente
and
tener
then
la
execute it.
fuente
So
de
it's not just a
financiamiento,
matter of
sino la
having
máquina
the
suficiente
resources or the
para ejecutar
financing, but
esos
also
recursos y la
enough of
claridad
a
de
machinery
que se
to
tienen que hacer
execute it.
inversiones
And
a
also
medio y
we
largo
have
plazo.
to know
Nosotros en
that
Colombia
these
tenemos un
investments are mid
principio
and long term.
en
In
lo que es el
Colombia, we
presupuesto,
have
que
a
es la anualidad.
principle in
Es
terms
decir,
of
que
budget,
los
which is
proyectos que
the
se formulen tienen
annual
que
payment. So the projects that are
ejecutarse en el
happening,
mismo año que
they
están
need to
asignados.
happen in the
Y es una
same
limitante muy
year that
grande,
they had
pero tenemos una
assigned.
figura
And
que se
that
llama
is a very
vigencias
big
futuras, ¿sí?
limit.
Las
But
vigencias
we
futuras tú
also
las puedes
have
comprometer hasta
another
3 años de
figure,
ciudad,
which is for
¿sí? No
future
puedes comprometer vigencias futuras de la administración. Entonces, lo que hicimos nosotros también, por
project,
ejemplo, para todo
so
el
you
tema de
can
reverdecer, para
expand
lo
it
que
to
es la
3 years.
inversión
So everything that had to
en
do
nuevos
with the
procesos de
investment
restauración y de
in this
reforestación urbana
restoration and
es hacer
urban
vigencias futuras
reforestation
para
process
poder
is we
sacar
use
ese
this
límite
figure
que es la
so that
anualidad,
we can skip that limit
obviamente
of
en el
a
marco de la
1-year
ley, y
project,
que
of
nos
course,
permita
within
hacer
the law,
contrataciones de
and to
2 o 3 años
allow
para
for
poder
us to hire
cumplir
2
estos
or 3
proyectos tan
years
grandes.
further
Entonces,
so that we
más
can comply
asignación
with these
presupuestal, una máquina
projects.
suficientemente
So
robusta para
having
saber
a
los procesos
robust
administrativos
machinery and a
contractuales
robust
y obviamente una
budget
orientación
was,
de
of
mediano
course,
plazo
key,
para
and
poder
then a midterm
establecer esa
guideline so that we
inversión.
can
Entonces,
establish this
eso ha sido un
investment.
proceso también de
So this
aprendizaje.
has also
Estos
been a
instrumentos que
learning
te menciono
process, of
están desde el
course,
año
because these
93 porque es una ley
instruments have
nacional, la
been
ley
there since
que creó el Sistema
1993.
Nacional
I
Ambiental en
think that it
Colombia,
was created by the
pero
environmental
eso, y se
system in
hicieron
Colombia.
la
But to be
ejecución de esos
honest,
recursos
the
también
execution of
históricamente en todos
these
los municipios
resources
y departamentos de
historically in
Colombia ha
all of
sido
the
baja, porque
municipalities
tampoco está toda la
has
capacidad
been low
institucional
because
en
we
todos los
don't have
municipios. Entonces, no es
all of
solamente
the
tener
institutional
más
capacity in all
de
of the
recursos,
municipalities.
sino
So it's
poder
not just a
establecer todos esos
matter of
elementos administrativos
having
que
the
permitan el
resources, but also
cumplimiento
having
y
the
ejecución
administration
efectiva de esos
instruments
recursos. Entonces,
to for
nosotros en
them
este
to be
momento también
applied.
estamos haciendo
And
un
so right
trámite
now
ante
we are also
el
having
Congreso
a
Nacional
paperwork
para
with the National
modificar esa
Congress so that we
asignación
can modify
específica
that specific allocation
de esta fuente
of
que digo que es del
the
1% de los
source that
ingresos
I'm saying,
corrientes
which
para la
is
destinación
1%
específica de
of the
adquisición,
income
mantenimiento de
for
predios.
acquisition
Queremos
and
ampliarlo, llevan
maintenance
dos
of this
debates de
property.
4 en
We
el Senado
want to
para
make it
incorporar
wider. We have
proyectos de
actually been
soluciones
having some
basadas en la
discussions in the
naturaleza,
Senate
lo
so
que
that we
permitirá
can
dinamizar
allow
esa
to
inversión
make
de
a
una forma
lot
mucho
more
más,
dynamic that investment,
digamos, basada en las necesidades de cada uno de los
because it
ecosistemas, de
has
las
been
comunidades
based on
también,
the needs of the
para poder
systems
invertir
and the
estos recursos,
communities,
porque no
but
solamente
the
es
intention
adquirir,
is to
llevamos
invest these
ya
resources
20 años
because it's not
adquiriendo
a
y
matter
muchas veces
of
ya
just
también quedan los
acquiring,
predios
because we
más
have been
difíciles de
doing that for
adquirir con
20 years,
problemas,
but then
digamos,
the
catastrales o de
harder
titularidad, digamos, de la historia del
lands, for
predio.
example,
Entonces, necesitábamos
cadastre and some
dinamizar, y esto nos
others.
pasaba
So what
también
we're trying to
no
do
solamente en
is
Bogotá,
to
sino en
have a
ciudades
more
importantes como
dynamic
Medellín o Cali, que son las ciudades grandes donde tienen esta fuente de recursos
flexibility, for example,
amplia.
in other
Entonces, eso es
cities
lo
as
que
well, in
estamos haciendo en
Medellin,
Bogotá
among others.
también,
So that is what we're
permear la
doing
agenda
in Bogota.
nacional
We're trying
para que
to
las
also
normas
include the
también
national
sean
agenda so
diferenciadas a
that
partir de las
norms can
necesidades y
be
avances de cada una
differentiated
de las
depending on
entidades
the different
territoriales
needs of
y
the
que
different
realmente uno cuando llega a
territories.
estos
And
puestos
of
de gestión
course, that
pública
once
pueda
that
también
you
tener esa
reach these
versatilidad de acomodar esos
positions, you can
recursos
also
un poquito
have
también
that
a la realidad
versatility,
del momento en que se está
versatility so
afrontando
that
el
you
reto.
can
Entonces, ese es
manage
el, como
these
un poco
according to the
la
challenge
realidad
that
a
you are
nivel de
facing. So
Colombia y de
that is
Bogotá frente
the
a lo
reality
que es
at
la
a
inversión pública.
Bogota level in terms of the investment and the budget.
Espero haber sido claro.
So hopefully with that, I was clear. Thank you so much, Diego. Thank you so much, Victor. And I also hope that you can be able to solve the fires down there. Yes, and I think that one of the topics that Victor was mentioning right now, and Diego as well, is one of the challenges that we find along the region. And I say it because it's one of the things that has happened. We see some situations where the representatives of the environment are just maybe one person in the team, and that, of course, makes it harder to also move forward. However, I would like to also mention that we are trying to achieve from WWF is for these network of cities can become some sort of support so that you can identify what type of projects could be duplicated, to identify what were the challenges in other cities and how they solved that, and for us to be able to keep moving forward. Right. Okay. So I think it's very interesting, Diego, as you were mentioning, to have these climate action plan turned into a public policy. Hopefully, you can tell us a little bit later how you reach this at a higher level, and also to take all of these lessons learned. And on the other hand, I don't know if there is any other question in the chat, but if not, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about how you managed to establish the goals that you have now aligned to the 1.5 of the Paris Agreement. If maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. Sure, Sami. So as the secretary was mentioning in her third slide, what was more important was to define what were the greenhouse gases issued by each one of the district level. So having that basis, that information was managed in 2021. So the information has a little of a backlog. We are doing a periodical update, but with that, what we are establishing is, okay, let's identify sectors like the transportation, which is 48% of emissions, just as the secretary mentioned. Having that agenda of electric transportation is very important in Bogota, not just because of the global commitment that we have in terms of fossil fuels, and we are getting rid of those emissions, but also in terms of air quality, and that is a local issue. So we can also improve a little bit more those components in terms of the particles and the gases that are being issued by those combustions. So that is the first thing with the transportation aspect. Second, energy consumption for commercial or households, that is 35% of emissions. So generally speaking, we have had a very important agenda for the energy transition from households, and in terms of, for example, fridges, washing machines, that are the ones that have the higher consumption in the household, so that through credit programs or some benefits from the energy company in Bogota, then people could have or could acquire these types of washing machines, etc., these other products. So that was also an agenda leadered by the national order, because we also have an eco label for these type of products, which is also used for other products. So we're trying to let the user use these household appliances, but now turning them electric. And so something else where we also have a high emission of greenhouse gases is in the solid waste, because we produce around 6,340 tons of waste per day, and so around 3,000 of those are organic. So what we're trying to do
poder hacer
is
un
we
aprovechamiento de
are
esos
trying
orgánicos,
to use
especialmente en el sector de
these
restaurantes, en el sector de
organic
comercio,
waste,
donde podamos
especially in
tener unas
restaurant
rutas
or in
selectivas
commerce, where we
diferenciadas
could
para
have
que no
a
solamente desde la
specific
prestación del
path
servicio público de
where
aseo,
not
sino
just
también
from
identificando
the
y
public
trabajando con
service,
privados que
but
tienen
also by
composteras
working with the private
que les puedan ofrecer el
initiatives,
servicio.
they
Entonces,
can have
hemos identificado
composts,
ya
and
17
maybe we
empresas
can
En Bogotá
have that
Sabana,
service. And so
donde
we
tienen
have
también sus lugares para hacer
37
la
companies
conversión de
where they
residuo
also can
orgánico a
have these
compostar. Entonces, también hemos
conversion from
identificado un
organic
potencial
waste to
máximo de
compost.
tratamiento de
So with
600
that, we
toneladas
are
con los
trying to
privados.
treat
Hoy están
these
alrededor de
tons.
300, 350
Right now,
toneladas
we
diarias.
have around
Pero también
300,
estamos convencidos que hay
350
que
tons per
trabajar con el
day.
privado,
But
porque ahí
we are
también es
convinced that we
un
have
negocio
to
que se puede
work,
plantear. No
generally
todo tiene
speaking,
que ser
because this is a
cargado al
business that
sector
could
público.
actually
Los
be
privados también pueden aportar
feasible. Private
para la
sector could
acción climática y
also
también pueden generar
provide for
negocios en el
this,
marco
and they can also
de este
generate
componente.
businesses
Y la
under
otra
this
línea donde
framework.
nosotros
And
también
then the
hemos
other path
establecido
where we
estas,
have
digamos,
also
distribuciones es en
established
el tema de
this
aguas
type
residuales
of
domésticas.
distribution is
Bogotá
in
genera el
terms of
4% de
sewage.
los invernadero
Bogota
en las plantas
generates
digamos, a
4%
través de lo que
of
es la
the
disposición
greenhouse
de los
gases
residuos
through
de vertimientos, ¿sí? De
the
vertimientos líquidos.
sewage and
Entonces,
liquid waste.
ahí ya estamos actualizando
So
una
with
de
that,
nuestras
we are
plantas de
trying to
tratamiento de aguas
update
residuales que
one of
pasa de
our plants,
4
water
metros cúbicos
treatment
a
plants,
7.2 metros
and
cúbicos. Esto se hizo
so
con
we're
un
trying to
crédito con el
expand
Banco
it. We
Mundial.
used actually a
Ese ya
credit with
está
the
a
World
puertas de
Bank,
entrar a
and
funcionamiento. Y
that is
tenemos otra
almost
planta en el
about to
sur de
start
Bogotá
functioning.
que
And
va
we
a
have
tratar
another plant in the
alrededor
south
de
of
14
Bogota that is
metros
going to be
cúbicos por
treating
segundo. Va a ser una de
around
las plantas de
14
tratamiento más
square
grandes
meters
en el
per
mundo,
second. It's actually
donde
going
pues
to
va a
be
haber
one
una
of the
inversión
biggest in the
que
world, and so
está
we're
alrededor
going
de
to have an investment of around
4.6 millones de pesos con la actualización última que se hizo.
4.6
Eso estamos
billion
hablando
pesos,
más
and so we're talking
de 1 billón de
about
dólares,
over
Carlito, pero
$1 billion.
ahí vamos a permitir también
But
que en el año
what we're going
2029 más o menos tengamos
to
la planta,
try
funcionando.
to
Entonces,
do is that
como
we also
ustedes
have
ven, con
this
esas
plant
inversiones en el
functioning
sistema de
by
tratamiento de aguas residuales, con
soon.
disminuir el
So with this
enterramiento de
both
residuos
aspects of
orgánicos
trying to
y
reduce
con todo
organic
lo
waste
que
and
es la
water
transición de
treatment
la
plants and
movilidad
everything that has
hacia
to
la
do with the
transición limpia
transition
y
of
todo el
mobility to
compromiso con el
clean
sector privado
transition
y
and
el
all of the
consumidor
commitments
es
from
que
the
logramos
public
establecer
sector
esas
and the
reducciones de
consumer,
emisiones
we
un
are trying to
15% a
establish these
2024, un
reductions. So
50% a 2030 y
50% by
pues lograr lo
2030,
deseado
and
que es la
hopefully we
carboneutralidad.
can reach
Obviamente,
the
esto es un
neutrality
compromiso
in terms of carbon. So
público-privado
this is a
que realmente
commitment,
se tiene
public and
que estar
private,
coordinando
that of
muy,
course
muy
has to
claramente
be
y pues también
coordinated very
adaptándose a las
clearly,
diferentes
and it also
contingentes que
has to
se
be
vayan dando por
adapted to the
factores
different
globales, como
contingencies
pues
that we can
la
have
crisis en Ucrania que
due
tenemos, la guerra en
to global
Ucrania,
factors, for
el factor
example,
del
the
dólar que
war in
también a veces hace que los
Ukraine,
proyectos
and
se vuelvan
also the
inviables. Entonces,
impacts
tiene que
that
ser muy
also can
adaptativo el
turn projects
administrador y el
into
gestor
something
público, también
invisible.
tiene que
So
estar
we
también con
have to
esa
really be paying
resiliencia a esos
attention
choques
to the
globales que se pueden dar
resilience
en temas de
of
economía
these
para
issues
poder
that we can
adaptar
have in terms of
rápidamente y poder
economy
cumplir
globally,
estos
so that we
elementos.
can
Y lo
comply
más
with this.
importante en toda esta línea, pues tendrá un
And the
tema
most
de
important in
monitoreo y
all of this is also,
verificación
of course, having
que nos pueda
monitoring and
cumplir esas
verifying
metas. Entonces, nosotros lo que estamos
of the
planteando ahorita
compliance of
es
these
la
goals. So
adopción de
what
un
we are
decreto
trying
que
to
establezcamos
do
esas
is
metas
adopt a decree
para que
where we
también
can
desde lo
have
que
these
son las
goals included,
secretarías distritales, la
so that
Secretaría de
from the
Hábitat, la
district
Secretaría de Desarrollo Económico
secretary,
puedan
from
incorporar también sus
economic
compromisos
development,
en
and
el
among
mediano y
others, they can
plazo,
also
porque
incorporate
si
their
desde lo público
commitments
no
in the
damos
mid and long
ejemplo y no
term.
impulsamos los
Because if
incentivos y
we
los
are
programas
not
suficientes para que el
fostering the
sector privado
incentives
pueda
or the programs for
desarrollarlo,
the
sería
private
un poco
sector to
complejo
be able
pues
to take
cumplir
part in it,
estas metas
then
que
it's going
estamos
to
aquí.
be a little bit complex for us to comply with these goals and to reach them. Thank you very much, Diego. That was a very complete answer. And I think it makes a lot of sense for the cities that are here. Actually, I would like to take an opportunity to invite also invite you all to our next webinar. And we are you seeing my screen? Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you. Hello, can you hear me?
Sí, Saimi, quitaste la presentación que ibas a poner.
Yes, you just got rid of the presentation. Oh, okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so as I was saying, I am going to share the presentation that we just had with the secretary and with Diego, with you. I'm going to share with you so that you can take a look at it a little bit further, and also the contact info, so that in case if you want to contact them, you can do that. And also, I would like to invite you all to our next webinar of this edition, which is going to be on March 15th, 9 a.m. Mexico City time, so it's around the same time. I am also going to put the link in the chat for you to go ahead and register. I don't know if anybody has any question, but anyway, I would like to mention that yes, we're going to share the contact information of Diego and Carolina for you to be able to contact them and talk to them. I don't know if there is any other question or comment. Yes, we are going to also send the recording both in Spanish and in English for this session. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much. I would also like to remind you that just as I was saying in the beginning, we're about to start the next edition of these City Challenge. So very soon, the officers of each one of the offices in the region are going to be contacting you to provide a lot more information, and you can also know what are the dates and the process that we're going to have. There are some modifications that we have in this next edition of the City Challenge, so I'm pretty sure that you would like these adjustments. Thank you so much to those of you that helped us answering the satisfaction survey to know what we're doing right and what we need to modify. Thank you so much. I think that we are finishing on time. Hope you have an amazing night or afternoon or evening. And thank you so much and have an amazing day. Can you email the presentation or should we get that on some page? We're going to send the presentation to all of you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you
Saludos a
very
todos,
much.
que estén muy bien.
Thank you, Diego. And about the next webinar, you're also going to send this to the link? Yes. Sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, we're going to send both the recording of this webinar as well as information of the following webinars. We are also going to send it through email. Saimi will be sending that to you. Okay, thank you. Yes, I just put it in the chat anyway. Thank you very much.
Que estén muy bien.